Climb down off that high horse, you collective Canadian cohorts. You gotta, at least, I mean, I get it, but you can't just start midstream or three-quarters of the way through the process. If you want the Canadians to have self-esteem or be like Americans, right, where you have, you think you're the greatest and you have such high amounts of self-esteem and self-respect, right, ambition, blah, blah, blah. The only way that happens if you have to start that very early on, right? So if you want Canadians to actually have that kind of mentality, you can't bring them through our retarded public indoctrination system where you're constantly told them to be slaves to the ruling class and then think that later on you can tell them, oh, no, you're the rulers, and that somehow you're just giving them a personality disorder is really what you're doing. And this article regarding Canada's economy, which is, there's already been past articles presented, evidence and findings that has shown clearly that Canadians that think that we are some exceptional beings in some way because we're the most indebted, right, in the world and stuff, or that we managed to escape the Great Recession. No, it's just we've prolonged the inevitable. The rest of the world, or a large portion of the rest of the world, are going through their pain and suffering right now, and we're looking at them like, oh, you poor bastards. Well, not we. I'm not. But the Canadian collective, right, are looking down at these people, whether they're in South America, or over in Europe or Russia or any of these Middle Eastern. And they're looking, oh, you poor bastards, we're doing so great. What they don't realize is the only reason why Canada is still going along is because they're still, Canadians predominantly for the most part, are still trying to live in this delusional, mystical, crazy world where you think you could just, I don't know, live in a fairy tale type setting for all of eternity, and you're never going to be affected by the world that surrounds you, or the consequences or ramifications of bad economic acts, deeds, and policy. No, Canada. No. Like usual, just like I've noticed many times, Canada's always late to the game. Unfortunately, Canadians are behind the times, not advanced. I'm sorry, Canadians. I hate to burst your bubble, but yes, you're not that advanced in comparison to the other countries that, not just population and better health care, better education, better this, better. I mean, yeah, Canada. No. There's nothing exceptional in any way other than the fact that we have a whole lot of landmass for a very small amount of people. That's the biggest, that's the one exceptional aspect of Canada. But the reason why that is, just like in places like Russia, right, it's because when you live in the most northern parts of the entire planet, you don't want to live up there where it's freezing all the time or where it's dark all the time or shit. So even that, I mean, it sounds like a claim to fame, but even that, it's not really. It's just that people don't want to live in the fucking igloos for the most part, right? Or in those kind of nasty climates. Canada's record household debt is threatening its financial stability. Global bankers fear. Yeah, no fucking shit. But listen to this. These articles are so important because they talk about like actual statistics and stuff, not studies and shit, right? And even though I guess some of these statistics can be twisted and distorted, in reality though, when you're doing the comparison, see, that's the thing. When you're doing a full-on genuine comparison, which is what matters. So if they were just talking about Canada without comparing Canada to other countries, it could be misconstrued and misrepresented. But Canada's debt, swelled by a decade-long housing boom to almost triple the size of its economy. Let me read this again. Canada's debt, swelled by a decade-long housing boom to almost triple the size of its economy, is drawing increasing concern from an international banking community that says it threatens growth and financial stability. The combined debt of Canadian governments, companies, and households reached U.S. $4.4 trillion in the first quarter. or 288% of gross domestic product, GDP, exceeding the same gauge for the US, the UK, and Italy, according to the Bank for International Settlements. So the Bank for International Settlements, in case, or for those of you who don't know, is the central bank for the central banks. So when they're talking this stuff, even though, like I say, I'm not a fan of them, but that should be raising some serious alarms, and some concerns for Canadian people when you're hearing this kind of information and statistics put forth. While Canada boasts the lowest government debt load among group of 7 countries, household debt is the highest of its peers, the Basel, Switzerland-based BIS said last month in its quarterly report. In September, Statistics Canada reported household liabilities rose to 100.5% of GDP, exceeding the size of its economy for the first time. Canada was the only developed country showing early signs of stress in its domestic banking system amid unusually high credit growth relative to GDP, the BIS said. So once again, yeah, we prolonged our pain. That's all we did. When everyone else was going through the pain after the 2008 crash, we prolonged ours. We didn't want to deal with the pain. Well, not we. I'm speaking for that collective mindset of people, right? Because obviously anyone that knows me, I'm an individual. I don't look for this shit. But like I said, when you're talking to people that, when you have to appeal to the masses, to the collective type mindsets, this is how you have to speak. I know it's disturbing, it's disgusting, it's so wrong on so many levels, but hey, it is what it is. The debt overhang represents one thing and one thing only: a pervasive constraint on Canada's economic growth potential. David Rosenberg, chief economist and strategist at Gluskin Sheff and Associates Inc., said by phone from Toronto, "When you get to levels on total debt that makes even the Italians blush, you know you're in a straitjacket." The economy continues to struggle to find growth drivers in the wake of oil price slumps, with exports consistently disappointing and business investments limping. Figures released last week show retail sales fell 0.1% in August, the third monthly decline, and the inflation rate trailed forecasts at 1.3%. The week data comes after the Bank of Canada cuts growth forecast on October 19th to 1.1% for this year from previous 1.3% forecast and 2% in 2017 from a 2.2%. But once again, even when they're talking about that, I mean, the government's trying to stimulate the economy, and yet it's still not growing at the rate they want. That tells you so much more than you really need to know. And the rest of this article is basically in line with what the kind of stuff I've been trying to tell Canadians for the longest time now, is just because you're late to the game, the last one to the punch bowl, doesn't mean that when you do get there and you take that big swig, that's probably going to be the same. If you take the same amount, and now that we're exceeding the amounts that even all these other countries like Greece, the US, UK, and a lot of these other really struggling economies, yeah. It's not even that you're drinking the same amount as those that drank that amount and ended up passing out on the floor, right? You're drinking in excess of that. So, yeah. There's no way you can pretend that you're not going to ultimately, in the end, at some stage of the game, going to have to go through the same experience that's going to it's going to knock the shit out of the egos of not just these central planners, but these collectivists and those that follow the narrative of their central planning overlords. When they are finally hit with reality at some stage of the game, and nobody knows exactly when it's going to happen, but when that does ultimately happen, there's going to be a shitload of people that have a whole lot of credentials on their walls, or even the lowly masses that just genuinely don't understand. There's going to be a whole lot of people who are going, well, how did this happen? Meanwhile, there's people like myself that's been paying attention for a long time now. We've been trying to warn you and tell you not only what's happened, but the reason why it's happened. So the fact that you're not paying attention now, well, okay, yeah, ignore my warnings. Go ahead. Don't yield. Don't heed. Don't listen to anything I got to say. I don't fucking care. But don't fucking whine afterwards that you weren't told. Don't complain. Don't run the government to tell them or to make your life easier when you have to fucking own up, when you have to actually own up to the kind of bullshit when the debt levels that you've been accumulating, just, take your medication. Deal with it. Deal with the reality for once in your fucking life. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.